Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Benefits and Challenges of Connectivity in Digital Transformation. I'm Aaron Hand, Executive Editor of Automation World, and I'll be moderating this discussion. As we travel around the different industry events throughout the year, one of the things we hear often from audience members is that the industrial Internet of Things is really not new. We've been connecting our machines and gathering data at our plants for decades. But the level of connectivity today is very different than it once was, and the technologies involved should not be underestimated. It's critical to consider the benefits that digital transformation can provide, and also the drawbacks and dangers. ARC Advisory Group surveyed and interviewed experts throughout industry to gain their insights about how they're connecting their machinery. Here today to discuss those results is ARC's Craig Resnick, who will help you understand the benefits and key approaches to effective connectivity, challenges that you'll face, and requirements for moving forward. Jeff Bates from PTC Kepware will be joining us as well, describing connectivity use cases to help bring these points into perspective. Before I let them take over, let me give you just a couple instructions. This webinar will be available for archived viewing. And if you would like to ask a question at any point during today's presentation, you can do so in the chat box on the right side of your screen. So let me tell you a bit more about who we have here today. Craig Resnick is the primary analyst for many of ARC's automation and financial services clients. His coverage includes digitalization, industrial IoT, Industry 4.0, enterprise integration, industry best practices, and operational excellence. Jeff Bates leads product marketing for ThingWorx's portfolio of edge and connectivity applications, including ThingWorx Industrial Connectivity, KepServer EX, and all Kepware products, the ThingWorx Edge Microserver, and the ThingWorx Edge SDKs. With that, I'll let Craig get the discussion started.
Hey, thanks a lot, Aaron. And let me go to the next slide, and we're going to tell you a little bit about ARC Advisory Group, just in case for those of you that may not know who we are. We've been around for about 33 years. We cover pretty much everything there is to cover to help manufacturers and companies that processors be able to automate their factories, connect up into the enterprise, and make sure that they're leveraging the latest and greatest automation and enterprise software solutions, and really are up to speed on the full digital transformation process. So we certainly cover these domains globally, and again, making sure that that all manufacturers and processes around the world have the latest and greatest information to move ahead with their digital transformation journey. So as we move forward with the next slide, you know, we get involved a lot with certainly a lot of OEMs and the end users as they're connecting their machines. And we've been doing this certainly going, well back into the 80s. I mean, when people were using proprietary networks for doing these tasks. And, but now as digital transformation is beginning to take hold, you're actually seeing a lot of new technologies being applied, and you're also beginning to see bring a whole different amount of benefits. And there's also, because of issues we'll talk about later about things like cybersecurity, there's also some drawbacks as far as having this level of connectivity. So what we've done is, we surveyed a large number of end users and OEMs that use machines, and got some very interesting results that I think may even find a few surprises as we begin to go over them. So as we move to the next slide, we just, first of all, we want to level set everything and talk about like what, from at least ARC's perspective, is, what is digital transformation? And, a lot of times people say that it's really just the ability to add, a lot of low-cost sensors and be able to process greater amounts of data, run the necessary analytics software, add a heavy amount of automation. But people are involved, because it's not just connecting machines, it's connecting people, and kind of taking the best of all worlds and collecting that data and converting it into meaningful information that really helps you run your enterprises more effectively and more productively, and most important, most profitably. So this is really kind of what we see at ARC is digital transformation. And as we go to the next slide, one of the things that you'll see from digital transformation is, and it really goes well above and beyond just the factory floor. I mean, even here at ARC, We've even had to expand into building automation and smart city practices at our firm, just because digital transformation really affects every organization. Whether it be again, to making sure that your building is energy management and maximizing energy management and energy efficiency, whether your cities as far as delivering services and automating traffic signals and traffic management and parking management. But digital transformation is really affecting all types of enterprises, again, ranging from the factory floor and the plant floor all the way to buildings and cities. And it really affects just about almost anything that we deal with on a daily basis. So as we go to the next slide, and we want to talk a little bit about, Industry 4.0 and IoT. Because to be honest, you can't have either one. You have to start at the foundation, and the foundation is connectivity. So you can't take advantage of any of the Industry 4.0 or IoT benefits until you establish that connection. And it's no longer just the simple machine connection, again, of a generation ago. It really has to involve a lot of the latest technologies where that allow you to take advantage of where digital transformation can take you. At the same time, this connectivity is not always an easy task. And, and to provide what we would like to see is seamless connectivity between machines and the plant floor and the factory floor, all other assets and people. It takes a lot of technology. It takes a certain level of skill, but we do think as though that once everything has been applied and everything has been deployed, I think you're really going to see the tremendous benefits of having this level of applying digital transformation to your connectivity solutions. So if we go over to the next slide, and this is what kind of like the ultimate vision of where digital transformation is going to take you, because it's not just connecting machines to other machines on the factory floor. It's really making sure that all devices are connected, whether it be the worker on the factory floor and having their tools connected, so data is being transmitted from the tools, say, up into the cloud. Edge connectivity, so we're actually taking data at the device level and being able to run analytics at the device level and being able to feed that information up into the cloud, for example. It's connecting to your customers, connecting to your supply chain, connecting to your remote service people as they're traveling around. So it's really just having all people, all devices, all assets, all machines, in communication with each other, and again, leveraging all that data into meaningful information to help every person, every machine, every enterprise, maximize their productivity and again, their profitability as well. So if we go over to the next slide, and when we put this survey together, we certainly had objectives in the respect of looking at what people are doing as far as connectivity, where they'd like to see it go over the next 5 years, benefits and challenges, and see what kind of value that they're getting. And then another thing that we wanted to talk about was what types of return on investment criteria or benchmarks are required in this area, because this is a space where, from ARC's perspective, that we find that a lot of automation or enterprise software investment decisions get made is they want to be able to do the numbers and be able to show how soon these solutions are going to be able to pay for themselves. So as we go over to the next slide and we start to get into some of the data, one of the first questions we asked is, how does machine connectivity, support your business? And we ask people to pick not one option, but all the options that they find are important to them, which is the reason why these answers certainly do not just add up to 100%. And process monitoring, process control would be the ones that we would certainly suspect to be one of the most important reasons for doing machine connectivity. But also the area, and this is the good news, is we're starting to see for digital transformation, is when people are doing preventative maintenance initiatives and analytics initiatives and Industry 4.0 initiatives. Now it's in enterprise-wide digital transformation initiatives. So now we're starting to see that people are beginning to apply some of the principles of digital transformation in their connectivity solutions today. So that's something that, again, we're pleased to be able to beginning to see progress in that direction. If we go off to the next slide, and we will talk about some of the approaches that are taking to connect to the machines. And we find it's really a a mix or a blended approach where some people are trying to deploy the connectivity solutions themselves. Maybe they've had experience from over the years of whether it be using some of the plant-wide networking technologies, whether it be even using some of the older OPC technologies such as OPC DA, using some of the newer OPC technologies such as OPC UA, but also maybe working with some systems integrators or third parties to kind of create some of the solutions, the connectivity solutions that are needed. But the thing that really still kind of popped out was we were looking at the number of people that were actually still doing manual data collection as part of the process. Now, the machine may have been connected, for in some fashion, but that means that all the information on the machine, some of it was being kind of stuck on an island, and they were using, manual clipboards, writing the information down, walking back to a computer and kind of using, I would say, as a homemade MES type of system as part of an Excel spreadsheet. So I was really surprised that there's still the 30% of the responses were still, as in spite of having the machine being connected, but we're still doing a certain amount of manual data collection as well. So that was something that I have to admit was a little bit surprising from the data. So if we move to the next slide, and we talked about the cost to connect to machines. Now, granted, we recognize that the people that we're asking the questions to are not going to have necessarily available the information to know what's the total enterprise cost. I mean, if they're working for a tier 1 organization with multiple sites and multiple plants, they're certainly not going to have that information. So we asked them to take the approach of, in your area, your line, your cell, your machine, what would that cost? And as you can see, the answers were really kind of all over the place, as far as ranging, say, from $5,000 annual spend, from up to people well over $100,000 for annual spend. But what this really tells me, in looking at kind of the type of answers we have, is that I think a lot of people were guessing. And so what the results of this survey tell us here at ARC is that this means that we probably need to have solutions that do a better job of not only connecting the machines, but helping people to come up with getting the information they need to be able to understand the key performance indicators. What does machine connectivity actually cost? How does it benefit the organization? So it just shows that the solutions right now in this area to help the people that are connecting the machines get this information may be a little bit lacking right now. So that's certainly an area that the industry can probably help these engineers as they're connecting the machines come up with some better data. So if we move off to the next slide, and everybody though who is connecting the machines certainly recognizes the value of doing so. And they recognize that down the road, this is going to mean that it's going to be more costly to connect these machines in the future. So everybody is anticipating, I think the number one answer here was like 20 to 50% increase in connecting machines, with some thinking it would almost go up 50% or even double. So I think you're in a situation that people are expecting these connectivity costs to increase, even if they're not really sure what those costs actually are. But they recognize that these costs will go up, and they need to be accounting for that as they're putting together their own budgets. But they also recognize that it is certainly worth the value. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of that value, as we go on. So as we go to the next slide, and we talk a little bit about the benefits of connecting to the machine. And yeah, these are things that, as you can see, almost universally for monitoring and control and remote diagnostics and service, and and obviously for people that may be in food and beverage or pharmaceutical, and they needs information for quality and compliance. For example, and information to kind of fill their KPIs, and certainly with the most notable one being is information that could be used for things like OEE, or overall equipment effectiveness. So there's no question that this data that's extracted from these machines as a result of the connectivity solutions is extremely valuable to their organizations, and they're really in a situation that they really cannot really go on as meaningful enterprises if they did not have the ability to be gathering this information from these machines. So if we go off to the next slide, and when you talk about what are the drawbacks, and pretty much across the board, everybody talks about certainly the dangers of connectivity and cybersecurity risk, and now would people be able to have access to the parameters of that machine and be able to make changes or be able to pull information out of the machine with the people who shouldn't be there. So that certainly was by far the biggest concern that most people has, and that's certainly not surprising in any way. Some people did cite, obviously, just the time and expense of connectivity. People had, in interviews, some people had cited the fact that, just taking the machine down and out of service and going through the project, that sometimes that creates a problem. And that was something that they certainly cited. And and just also some issues of just the multiple connectivity standards, and obviously trying to connect to sometimes various generations of equipment, because maybe the new machine has state-of-the-art automation, and maybe some of the equipment in the plant maybe less than state-of-the-art. So those are some of the issues that were, but from a drawback perspective, it certainly did not overwhelm it to the point where that the drawbacks exceeded the benefits. So, which we'll talk a little bit about at the next slide, which is I guess a double negative, the negative consequences of not connecting to the machine. So this is just an area that, okay, if we truly did eliminate the connectivity, what would we lose? And interestingly enough, and maybe this was probably the statistic was probably a little bit biased from our food and beverage and pharmaceutical respondents, but just a lack of information for quality and compliance, because obviously now you're in a situation that there is no way you can continue production, obviously, if you're not able to produce this information. And also just the ability to do the remote servicing and remote diagnostics, which is something we're going to talk a little bit later in the presentation, because we think this is actually one of the greatest opportunities for machine builders to kind of create a continuous revenue stream by being able to maintain connectivity to these machines over the long haul, and and just the ability to continue, of course, to just monitor and control and improve performance, and keep the ability to maintain and keep those KPIs in a real-time mode. So we're looking at KPIs as they're occurring, rather than looking at it historically from a report from, say, the last shift, for example. So if we go off to the next slide and talk about the value, and just as I found that they didn't really have a good handle on what it costs for connectivity, you can certainly see that they really did not have a handle on the value that they actually derived. They all knew it was critically important, but it was in half the cases they really couldn't tie a dollar amount. And again, we asked them to take that same perspective: is don't worry about your entire enterprise or every plant, just worry about the machine that you're working on or the line that you're responsible for. And that's what they were able to, as I said, about half the people were able to come up with some sort of a value. But I can honestly say that I think in many cases, again, people were doing estimates because, again, the lack of tools that enable that value to be presented to the people, so they really understand truly what is the true benefit of this connectivity, and what are they looking at from a business perspective, from a financial perspective. So that's something I think that that the data clearly defines a void in the marketplace, and a need for some additional solutions to address that area. So again, let's go to the next slide, and we talk about the ROI requirements. And I can honestly say, being with ARC for about 20 years, and for doing these surveys for pretty much for that entire time, I have never seen a survey where the no ROI requirement was the majority. It's a slight majority, but the majority nonetheless. And that just says that people were telling us, especially when we would interview some of them after the survey, and they would say that I can't measure it, and I wish I had the tools to measure the value of the connectivity, and I wish I had the tools that could help me calculate my return on investment. But I can tell you, we can't live without this connectivity. So the reality is that this is one area where I mean, I've been to plants where people have had a right justification to buy a $20 photoelectric sensor and prove the return on investment of the $20. Here's a case where you're spending sometimes hundreds of thousands, if not into the millions, for connectivity, and they recognize that the criticality of the connection is so important that they, even if they don't have, they certainly wish they had the data so they could calculate the ROI. But here's a case where we don't have it, but we still recognize the importance, and I can still get C-level signatures to approve these connectivity projects, because even at that level, they recognize the value of the connectivity. So next slide, please. And now we're really going to talk about some of the recommendations, kind of based on the, going through the qualitative and quantitative results, from the survey. And I think that, I guess probably the difference between going from, your connected machine of say 20, 25, 30 years ago and your connected machines in a world of digital transformation is really the fact that you're able to leverage a lot of the technologies, whether it be for big data, which allows you, artificial intelligence, machine learning, to be able to do prescriptive and predictive analytics. And by combining that with all this connectivity, really kind of helps you, try to raise that level of connectivity from just being connected to being connected and having the tremendous amount of business value that it takes to optimize the operation of your business. And I mean, obviously the time and expense of implementing the connectivity are concerns, but one of the things that we really want to make very, very clear is that with the number of people that are still trying to do the connectivity themselves, or thinking that they might have the right staff to do it, especially companies where they've had a tremendous amount of exodus of people, because with a lot of baby boomers retiring, and people taking, new people taking over those slots that may not have the experience. I mean, we really emphasize at ARC the use of trying to use third-party solutions, which I think will lower the cost of connectivity and certainly speed up the timeline of providing the connectivity. So that's a very, very strong recommendation. Is let's not try to do this ourselves, especially again with a transitioning workforce. There's great third-party solutions in the marketplace, and I really think the companies can really benefit from lowering cost, increasing productivity, increasing speed to connectivity. So this is something we certainly really recommend to all end users and machine builders as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. And and I think some of the things that manufacturers need to do. I mean, in reality, we talked about the fact that the cost to connect these machines is going to increase. They need to certainly make sure that they have the budget and funding available for that. And again, even if they can't measure the ROI, I think they recognize that the ROI is will follow in, even if it's something that can't be precisely measured. And but I really think the idea is, is sometimes when people will ask us, where do we start, is first look at your existing machines and make sure that any machine that already exists in any location has the level of connectivity so you can do things such as remote diagnostics, and making sure that you can optimize the performance and value of that machine regardless of the location. And we really think that that is critical. As some people will say, well, we'll connect our new machines down the road, and we won't provide the digital transformation process solutions on our existing machines. And we certainly advise the opposite, which is the fact that you really need to start with those existing machines and apply the latest technologies of digital transformation, and make sure you're maximizing the value of those existing assets. Don't just put it off for the future and wait until you can go ahead and be purchasing new machines to really kind of take advantage of the latest digital transformation technologies. Let's go to the next slide, please. And when we talk to when we got the results from the machine builders and systems integrators, which is certainly part of the survey pool, we keep thinking in terms of how do you maximize the value of this connectivity? How can you make sure that you can have a continuous revenue stream with this machine? So if you're a systems integrator and you deploy the machine, now you can connect the machine and be able to do remote maintenance. You can do patches, software updates, maybe get on the OpEx side of the ledger and be able to charge a monthly fee for doing this. So this gives the machine builder and the systems integrator tremendous opportunity to say, post the time that the machine has been installed, started up, everything's running smoothly, but to be able to continue to kind of be part of working with the end user and certainly be part of the machine's life cycle process and be able to take advantage of the fact that that you're able to do that and now continue the revenue relationship with that customer over the long haul. So that's something that we really think is important, and we think that's something that even especially companies where quality and regulatory compliance is critical, and be able to monitor that information, from remote locations, and that way changes can be made in the fastest period of time possible. The other thing that's critical is, just as we think that companies should not be trying to connect the machines themselves and look to third parties, they really need to look to cybersecurity companies as technology providers to make sure that the machines are connected as safely and as securely as possible, and don't try to, again, rely on your in-house talent to do that. There's cybersecurity experts themselves. It's hard enough to keep up with all the latest changes in that industry and the technology on a day-to-day basis. So we really think in terms of partnering with companies that have the cybersecurity expertise to make sure that those machines are connected as safely and securely as possible. If we go to the next slide, please. So, you got to really think in terms of that. If people already are not being able to come up with the specific ROIs because the tools aren't available, but still recognize the value, I think nothing, spoke louder in this survey that the fact that people recognize this is something that's mandatory, and that the connectivity needs to be enhanced to the digital transformation level. And as great as it would be if the marketplace could give them the appropriate tools to make it much easier for them to measure the value of the connection and be able to measure the ROI and be able to deploy some of those software solutions. But regardless, these paybacks, when people have been able to measure them, are typically very, very short. For people who have been able to measure them, they're typically in the 1 year or less, which is usually the criteria that we seem to find when it comes to automation and enterprise investments in manufacturing and processing. So again, I think this is a case that we have to assume that the ROI is going to be a given, even if you don't have the results available for you. And if you need to make a guesstimate as to what people are experiencing with return on investment, those that have been able to measure it, again, think in terms of about a year or less. So let's go to the next slide, please. And what are some of the benefits of digital transformation of connectivity to machines? As far as the end result is concerned, I mean, it's certainly done a great job to kind of minimize process variability and just having a better control as far as on the output of what's being manufactured or what's being processed. That's certainly increased the quality and eliminate lowered waste and having fewer rerun products. One of the criteria in digital transformation is certainly being able to put low-cost sensors in all your rotating assets to do asset performance management. So what it's been able to do to help asset health and reduce unscheduled or unplanned downtime, and being able to maximize asset performance. and being able to using things like predictive and prescriptive analytics to make sure that we find when that machine is going to fail before it fails, so we can now do a scheduled shutdown and get the appropriate people involved to make the repair as quickly as possible and get the line back up and running as soon as you can. Eliminating or minimizing any sort of incidents, especially issues where worker safety or plant safety or community safety is at risk, because you're able to get a better handle as to being able to manage that process, because you have the connectivity that enables you to be able to see problems before they occur. And now having all this connectivity, having all these low-cost sensors, having all this big data that's being collected, now you're able to really begin to do cognitive learning and be able to deploy artificial intelligence and machine learning, because now you've been able to gather terabytes and terabytes of data where you're going to be able to make the best decisions going forward, because you're going to have this data is going to have accumulated such a great number of different scenarios and experiences that decisions can be made from that data. So the ability to do AI and machine learning in the future as a result of this is going to be greatly enhanced, but it can't be done obviously without digital transformation as it pertains to the machine connectivity. Next slide, please. We'll just get to a quick summary now of really, what does it mean for enterprises? What does it mean for the machine builders? What does it mean for the employees? What does it mean for the end users as a result of this digital transformation? And you're really going to see just the whole transactions between manufacturers and customers are really changing, because you're really looking at more of an outcome perspective rather than just selling, goods and services. So that by the ability to connect to these machines and the ability to have all access to all this data, you're now going to be, there's going to be services that are available to sale that were never even thought of or technically able to be done in the past, regardless of where these machines are located. You're kind of creating all new rules and ecosystems as a result of having this connectivity, and it's forcing companies to change things like metrics and KPIs and best practices and requiring new tools. With digital simulation, artificial intelligence, the ability to create digital twins where you can create the machine in software ahead of time and simulate how it's going to run and be able to make changes before the machine is even started up. So you're able to kind of move to the process of leveraging the machine as a digital twin. And it's really changing, from a supply chain and sourcing. It's really kind of having great impacts on how you work with your material suppliers as well. And as we go off to our final summary slide, and we talk a little bit about, this is enabling companies to continue each year to get faster and more responsive, and that's something that's certainly on everybody's radar screen of how you're going to increase your efficiency and your KPIs such as OEE each and every year. And it was mentioning earlier about the fact that you're now, instead of actually selling products, you're actually selling results and selling outcomes, and it really changes the way that you're marketing your machine as far as what does the customer expect the benefits of why they're going to purchase your machine, and how that machine is going to help them be more productive and more profitable. And again, by having that connectivity to the machine, it really makes for keeping a relationship with the customer. So it goes beyond the one-time sale, and is really going to change the way these machines are engineered, designed, and built, maintained, and supported. So it's a whole new world as a result of digital transformation, as it applies to machine connectivity. Okay, and with that, I want to thank you very much. I look forward to taking your questions, and I'm now going to turn it over to Jeff Bates at PTC Kepware.
Great. Thanks very much, Craig. If we can advance to the next slide. Perfect. So again, my name is Jeff Bates. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for the Kepware line of business at PTC. And I just want to jump in here to quickly introduce Kepware and our solutions, and then illustrate some of the concepts that Craig discussed with a real-world example. And I'll close with really what we believe is one of the major takeaways based on the data that Craig presented. So on this slide, we'll do just a quick introduction to Kepware for those who aren't familiar. And Kepware's been around for 25 years, and really the key point here is that during that time, we focused exclusively on connectivity. And we believe that's really important for manufacturers who are looking to use a best of breed strategy. And when we say best of breed strategy, we're really talking about industrial enterprises who want to purchase the best automation equipment, the best motion control equipment, the best SCADA system, the best MES system, instead of kind of grouping everything together and buying from a single vendor. And an exclusive connectivity, an exclusive focus on connectivity is critical in that type of environment, because you really need solutions that focus on interoperability instead of solutions that focus on pushing customers to one solution or another, or work better with a specific type of asset or system. So that's really the ethos. As you can see, we started with a focus on discrete manufacturing, but have since expanded into additional industries and have a global presence. So that's really what Kepware is about. To kind of go into how we do that, we can go to the next slide. And so, the question is, how do we enable diverse assets and systems to communicate with one another? And that's really through our flagship product, KEPServer EX. KEPServer EX creates a standardized connectivity layer by connecting to all of your industrial automation assets via a collection of over 150 device drivers and plugins. And then that product makes the data available to traditional traditional industrial automation clients, such as SCADA, HMI, MES systems, as well as technologies that enable digital transformation, such as IIoT platforms and cloud solutions, really the solutions that Craig referenced earlier. And it's important to note that a single install can provide information to all of these systems without compromising device performance. So we'll dive into a little bit more detail on what that looks like on subsequent slides. But we believe that this type of architecture is a key enabler of digital transformation. So we can go to the next slide. And let's dive into a real use case that illustrates some of the implications of the data that Craig shared. So this example comes from Faurecia, which is a global tier 1 automotive supplier. And if you're not familiar with Faurecia, they focus on a number of critical automotive components listed out here, and they've got facilities across the globe. And just to start to delve into their story a little bit, their customers demand complete traceability. So this is where we start to see some of the data that Craig referenced come out for Faurecia. For them, connectivity is not just a necessity. Connectivity is just a necessity. It's really just a cost of doing business. So if you look at the time that we pulled together this case study, Faurecia was also starting to look into digital transformation, a key aspect of which is enabling executives to view and make decisions on real-time metrics coming from their factories. So let's delve a little bit more into the challenges that Faurecia was facing. And we can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, they've always had connectivity, or connectivity was really just a cost of doing business in order to provide traceability to their customers. And I think probably most people on the webinar understand this concept, but essentially it just means that if a product were to fail, or if a customer has any inquiry into a product, Faurecia can go back and show a record of really every single procedure that was done to create that product, and to show that it was created to spec. So the problem that Faurecia was facing was that the approaches that they had traditionally used for connectivity were difficult to scale to all of their sites globally. To bounce down to the bottom bullet here, additionally, some of those solutions that they were using were simply not reliable, or didn't work when they got to scale. So, and two of the specific challenges that that they had when trying to scale was that implementation time at every site was very time consuming. And part of the issue of that was that they were still trying to create custom OPC DA clients, the legacy DA, or excuse me, the legacy OPC specification, which, as some of you may know, is a relatively heavy lift from a programming side. And as I mentioned, the solutions that Freesia was using didn't enable them to provide plant KPIs or that really executive level information in real time to executive stakeholders. And it's important to note the business challenges that came out of these technical challenges. So first, as I said, implementation time was simply extended. That has real impact from a business perspective. It means that projects took longer, they were more expensive, and that the timeline for getting actual value out of those projects were delayed. So second, this problem was really compounded if they ever needed to change out software applications. So if there was a decision made that, hey, we want to go to a different MES system or other system because we've identified a better system that works better for us, simply want to go to a best of breed system, that implementation would essentially need to be redone along with all the associated costs and timeline delays. And then because they didn't have enterprise visibility, they were missing opportunities to create value by looking at key metrics across the organization. So if we go to the next slide, we can start to delve into what the solution was. So Freesia was facing all of these challenges, and they turned to Kepware, which they'd been using in certain plants for just simple kind of more one-to-one legacy connectivity. But by working with Kepware, Freesia found that KepServerX could not only provide that legacy, in this case, OPC DA connectivity, but could also, from that same application, deliver that data to the next generation MES system that they were implementing. So one of the key benefits here is that developers working on that MES system were able to switch from trying to code a custom OPC DA client to simply working with HTTP data, which many folks, especially from the more commercial IT side, are a lot more familiar with. And so that was a dramatic shift for that group. They were able to decrease implementation time specific to connectivity from 6 months down to just a few days. So huge savings. And additionally, they found the solution to be simply more stable and reliable than what they had used in the past. And this new MES system enabled visibility for executives. So it was a great success story that illustrates how industrial enterprises can leverage their legacy connectivity in a new way that really prepares them for digital transformation. But even beyond that, looking into the future, Freesia realizes that the solutions they use today may need to be changed out in the future. So they may choose another application, as I said, that consumes data over MQTT or OPC UA or some other protocol that they're not using today. And really with this concept of a standardized connectivity layer, they don't have to worry if that future platform that they choose can communicate directly with their PLCs or CNCs or torque tools, and which all of those may come from many different vendors. They may speak different protocols. But with this standardized connectivity layer, they've really abstracted all of that information and are simply, when they implement that new solution, they're simply ready to get started creating their applications and working towards digital transformation. And so that's really the message I wanna close with. Just wanted to jump in here to give a quick example of how what this looks like in the real world. So we can jump to the next slide. And I think it's key to note that even if you're not in the midst of a digital transformation right now, it still makes sense to think about connectivity strategically, because it's very likely, as Craig said, that your organization will be undertaking a digital transformation initiative sometime in the future. There's just so much value associated with digital transformation that it will force organizations to digitally transform and reap all the benefits that Craig mentioned. So really, again, we encourage you to utilize a connectivity solution that can meet both current connectivity needs in the facility, but can also scale to and connect to applications that are going to enable these next generation use cases. And really prepare yourself, as the title here says, really future-proof your data and your connectivity architecture. So with that, I will pass it back to Aaron, and we can open it up for questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Craig. Also, lots of really good information here. We're going to take the rest of our hour to cover a few questions here. I'll start with one for Craig. You showed the slide with more than half of the companies you surveyed did not have that ROI requirement for machine connectivity, which seemed pretty surprising to me. So how about all the companies that do have to really justify that ROI for CapEx and OpEx spending? What do you suggest that they do to overcome that issue at their companies?
Well, yeah, we were very surprised with that result as well, as far as the no ROI requirement for a little over half of them. But for those that do have an ROI requirement, the first question we ask them is, what is your biggest pain point in the, based on in your plant or in your machines? And I'd say more often than not, the first pain point they come back with is, well, the machine shuts down, we have these unscheduled downtimes. And then we'll say, okay, if we could come up with a solution that could eliminate or minimize unscheduled downtimes, what is there a way to put a cost? What does that cost your company, and whether you're putting that cost in, it's per hour or per shift, or how much does downtime actually cost? And we come up with that number, and then what we'll do is we'll work with them to try to come up with okay, if we're going to be maybe installing some sensors, lower cost sensors into the machine, be able to install maybe some analytics software, put in what we say is an APM or an asset performance management solution. Again, all part of the whole digital transformation and machine connectivity process. And if we can say, okay, if this shutdown is going to cost you X $1,000 per hour, and this solution is going to cost you Y $1,000, how many shutdowns is it going to take, or how many hours of shutdown is it going to take for this solution to pay for itself? And sometimes they find is, wow, sometimes it could be just a couple of hours of saving of unscheduled downtime, and this solution has already paid for itself. So we'll find is that we say, let's focus on the biggest pain point. Let's find a way to measure what that pain costs. Now let's put together the solution and what type of hardware and software sensors are going to be involved. And now let's put the cost of installation, and let's see how long that solution would pay for itself. And we find is in almost all cases, when they focus on unscheduled downtime, that provides them the justification to kind of get started. And then once they get started with this with these connectivity and digital transformation, it's amazing the other ideas that come, and those ideas often don't require maybe the same detailed measurement for the return on investment calculation, because they say, wow, I can't believe how fast this solution, this asset performance management solution to minimize unscheduled downtime helped how fast the solution was justified. So that's pretty much the advice we give for people that on the less than 50% that do require an ROI calculation.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So this next question is for you as well, Craig, but I certainly, Jeff could speak to this because it sounds like a pretty similar situation to what Barisha was facing early on. The typical scenario of HMI connected to PLCs via OPCDA, and PLCs to PLCs just via the vendor's networking technology. So what kind of steps would you guys recommend for companies to raise the connectivity to the digital transformation level?
Well, one of the things that we usually think about is for the most part, most of the connectivity involves something that's going into some sort of a controller, whether it be a PLC or a PAC or a DCS. And so it's usually, I would say, the typical connections of, say, sensors and transmitters that are where you're measuring, you're making a measurement and then making a control decision, and then obviously going out to a valve or a solenoid or what have you. You know, a typical PID closed loop type of scenario. When you move to digital transformation, you're actually installing sensors. Often they're much lower cost than the traditional sensors that you're using as part of control. But you're not always sending that information to the controller because it's not really impacting a control decision. This could be, if I want to take that from the previous question about asset performance management and being able to look at things such as, let's say we want to monitor a gearbox. We want to know what's the bearing temperature, or is there oil filings? Is there metal filings in the oil bath that could possibly cause a downtime, or are the bearings running too hot? Here's a case, or is there a little measuring the vibration of the gearbox? Now we're in a situation that these variables coming from these new low-cost sensors for IoT really have nothing to do with making a control decision. And in many cases, they're being, analyzed in another, in a server somewhere, or sometimes even, in an edge device. So it's, at the process itself. And it's really a scenario where you're kind of, that's how you're really transferring from just your typical connectivity, moving all the way up to digital transformation, because you're not just looking at things from the control aspect, you're looking at things from the business aspect. And how can you, better optimize your supply chain, and how can you optimize when you're going to be planning your shutdowns? So that's really kind of, how we advise clients to say, let's think in terms of adding additional inputs that don't necessarily going to have to require an input channel on either a PLC or a PAC or a DCS. This is something that's going to be going into another type of system that's really going to help from a production management perspective to be able to help you make better decisions that are obviously going to affect your production schedule, affect the information that's going out to your supply chain, to ordering product, affecting information that would go to your maintenance people to schedule service, or schedule parts to be delivered for that service. So that's pretty much how we advise them to move forward and kind of go from just traditional connectivity to digital transformation machine connectivity.
Okay, great. Jeff, did you want to chime in on this at all?
I can. Yeah, that'd be great. So I think the first point is that with the suggestion that Craig made, we're not talking about rip and replace, and I think that's really important. Is that to garner or reap these next generation benefits, you don't have to do a full, you don't have to recreate the process, install new machines, and do a full rip and replace. It is possible to get these connectivity benefits and these digital transformation benefits without buying all new equipment. And so I think Craig makes a great point that you can install or there are new low-cost sensors that you can use to get information that you previously never had as well. So that's definitely a part of the solution. I think another part of the solution is certainly to leverage the information that's already there, potentially in these, in the controllers, in the systems that Craig made reference to, and so that's where we kind of get back to use a system that can not only, or use a connectivity solution that can not only collect data from the new sensors, but also can collect data from the existing assets. And on the other side of that, the device side of things versus the application side, use a connectivity solution that can not only supply that information to a traditional industrial automation client like an HMI or a SCADA, but also to some of these next generation systems. And just one last point on the new sensors. I think one of the one of the things that has been a challenge with industrial connectivity in the past is that you've got siloed data. So you've got one system that has all the data around, you know, a certain process or system, and you have another system that's, you know, your quality system, and it's difficult to make connections between those two systems, and if you do, it has to be custom, and there's development work involved. So I think you know, one of the major benefits of digital transformation is really about breaking down silos and getting, you know, the information from the controller where it makes sense. Maybe not, you know, you probably don't need all you know, 50,000 data points or tags that are in that controller in the same system that you're getting that new sensor information from, but you may want a handful, you know, 10 to 15 data points from that controller, and you may want to put that together with the data that's coming from these new sensors. And so just thinking about a solution that enables you to do that is important.
Okay. Well, we have several more questions that I would love to get into. I think we could probably talk about this for a couple more hours, but I am going to go ahead and wrap things up and let our listeners be on their way. So thank you both again very much. This has really been good information, and thank you for our audience joining us today.